On the first day of 7th grade, I sat down on a lab bench next to a boy that I had never met before. Now, I don't remember if I'd introduced myself or if he'd been the first one to talk, but what I do remember is something he asked me. "Where are you from?" So I answered, "California." But then he asked me, "But where are you from?" And so I said, "You want to know what my ethnicity is?" And he said yes, and proceeded to guess a multitude of countries, starting with China, to Japan, to Korea, to Mongolia, to Thailand, to Taiwan, completely putting my geography skills to shame. When I told him I'm Vietnamese, he asked me shocked, "Did I really forget Vietnam?" Children of immigrants are not the product of one nation, but rather the product of multiple competing cultures. This wasn't the first time that I'd been asked, "Where are you from?" And it certainly wouldn't be the last time either. In fact, if I was given a nickel every time somebody asked me, "Where are you from?" I could probably afford to go to Vietnam for the first time. I'd never even been there, so I couldn't respond to people when they'd say things like, "Oh, I heard it was beautiful there," or "Do you like the pho there?" You can assume a lot of things about me. My name, Hungarian. It doesn't necessarily scream American. If anything, it's the first thing about me that immediately attracts attention. You'd assume that I was foreign. As a hyphenated person, Vietnamese American, I have two versions of myself that often clash. On one hand, my family expects me to abide by their cultural expectations, and on the other, people I meet often ostracize me and label me as a foreigner. Children of immigrants are not the product of one place, but rather the product of multiple competing cultures. Where my family is from will tell you very little about who I am. Vietnamese expectations are very different from American expectations. For one, there's a very apparent emphasis on material wealth. Money is the only surefire way to see that you've made it in life, and that's why you hear the exaggerated but not completely untrue stereotype of Asian mothers who want their kids to be doctors or lawyers or engineers or even presidents. American expectations, on the other hand, are much less extreme. The basic expectation is for you to follow the American dream and your passions. The money will come back, but the time won't. That's why my parents were attracted into this country. They are living proof of the stability that our promise is to immigrants. Over 130,000 Vietnamese refugees fled the country during the Vietnam War. My mom was one of them. Nguyen Kim Sun is the epitome of a war-torn immigrant. Born during the height of the Vietnam War, she was the youngest of 10 siblings and escaped the country last. It wasn't until her older brother secretly fled the country that her mother realized the severity of the country's state. My grandmother watched as her children were smuggled out of the country, some being arrested multiple times when their escape plans were exposed. My own mom refused to leave until my grandmother's unexpected passing left her with no other choice. When she sailed away from her home country with nothing but the sack on her back, she dreamt of freedom on a distant shore. She drifted along coasts for weeks, arriving at the Philippines and later Australia, and it wasn't for years afterwards that she would come to America, striving for prosperity and hoping to be reunited with her siblings. She struggled a foreign battle alone, having nothing to her name, but soon she would meet her husband, another Vietnamese immigrant who had come to America years before her. My dad, Phan, known as Nan to Americans, arrived in Oklahoma at the young age of 14, the typical age of a high school freshman. Although he was given more of an advantage than my mom, getting to learn English at a relatively young age, sacrifices were still expected to be made. He was separated from his siblings, who were sent to Canada, and years after he arrived in Oklahoma, he learned that his older brother had passed while trying to flee the country. His high school years were wasted in low-paying jobs while his classmates were living out their American-born privileges. Instead of going to high school dances, he spent the nights tucked in the back of a Mexican restaurant washing dishes. It's clear to see why immigrants place such an apparent emphasis on material wealth. It's to make up for the poverty and powerlessness that they have felt, and the hope of experiencing the privileges that come with money. I was born a Vietnamese girl in America. I looked Vietnamese, I learned Vietnamese ideals, and I spoke Vietnamese. But when I was shipped off to English-speaking public schools, I began to lose my culture. My uncle used to tell me I was like a banana, yellow on the outside, white on the inside. He told me that I looked Vietnamese, but I acted American. But when I went to predominantly white schools, my classmates would tell me things like, "Oh, I didn't know that you spoke English." Stereotypically Asian-based questions like, "Oh, where are you from?" were not new to me. What my classmates didn't know was that I was barely in contact with my own culture. The closest I could get to feeling Vietnamese was when my family braved the 1-hour drive to Little Saigon in Westminster. And that was when I felt inherently Vietnamese. But when I returned home, I'd find that my Vietnamese and American identities could not coexist. There is no shortage of assumptions from either side of the hyphen. So what have I learned about myself these past few years? For one, I'm not American, and I'm not Vietnamese. I'm not either. Or I could be both. I could be Vietnamese and American, or I could be myself, the individual without the label. We as a society need to be more open-minded when approaching someone new. Asking them questions like, where are you from, won't tell you anything you need to know about them. Instead, we need to learn to talk to others without retreating to lazy labels that stereotype individuals. And you can start now. I can be the very first person that you meet and create no assumptions about. Let's start. Hi, my name is Phan. I am 17 years old, and I am from San Diego, California. It's nice to meet you. Let me tell you more about myself. Thank you.